Thank you. I have to follow this course. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Tony. And thank you all for appearing in high volumes to listen to us talk about powered lightweight vehicles. I guess I'm the sort of slightly oddball person here because I'm an academic. So I'm under strict orders not to give an academic talk. So I come from a slightly odd background too. Is this going to? We're there. So really, my background is in the automotive industry. So I spent the majority of my career fundamentally tricking people into buying cars. Not as a salesman, you understand, but as a designer, as an engineer, and as someone who really challenges the way people respond to innovation. Now, across a range of sectors, now my job, as I see it, is to really start to stimulate some of the possibilities and set some of the conditions under which we can innovate within this sector. So my job today really is to think about how we set those conditions for innovation and how we start to highlight some of the possibilities in which we can encourage the marketplace at large to adopt lighter weight vehicles, or for us to make a step change in that regard. So I guess the first kind of part of this is to look at how we might do it. Now, my bit is very small. We start to look at the way we look at the latent and tacit needs of customers, the things people respond to. And vehicles are inherently emotive things. Whilst we post-rationalize decisions, the vast majority of the things we do, particularly when we buy cars or vehicles of any sort in a personal ownership model, is to buy the things we like. We also desire and aspire to what is a traditional automotive narrative. The precision, the comfort, the utility, the robustness, the safety, the luxury, and the brand, of course, of automotive travel. That aspiration doesn't necessarily always extend to public service vehicles or to public transport. So we have an opportunity here to make a step change in weight and make a step change in behavior and culture without some of the drawbacks of some of the municipal transport or some of the sort of proximity issues that go along with that. So effectively, we're kind of here. We're in the creativity and design space where we're actually starting to see the emergence of new vehicles. In customer terms, that's early adoption. But really, to meet some of the new strategies and really to meet the bold agenda of government and of NGOs and of OLEV and DFT and broader stakeholders at MCIA and the automotive industry, we have to make a step change. And that step change means moving from early adoption to early mass adoption. And that means early mass acceptance. And how do we start to do that? And that means changing behaviors, breaking habits, and breaking cultures. And we all do it. We all stand in the optimum place on the train platform in order to get on the right carriage and the right set of doors in order to exit the station at the optimum place. We all kind of optimize where we queue at a filling station or how we deal with fuel economy on a motorway. Some people pump their tires up too and remove the roof bars, but not all. So we're dealing with fundamentally, on the one hand, innovative behavior in terms of customer practice, and on the other hand, bad habits that are very difficult to break. So the headline for this is really looking at identifying possibilities and providing what you call hero projects or halo projects, the vehicles that you see behind you that start to galvanize market acceptance, to start to really look at providing the desire in a sector that is much lighter, much more efficient, and has much less embedded energy than the current sectors that dominate the marketplace, particularly in the urban and extra-urban environments. And we this looks like we're moving around in circles, but I assure you it isn't. The decisions in response to policy outcomes are pretty mature, they're pretty well evolved. We kind of know the direction of travel. We certainly have a good steer on where the ambition is for the timing of that direction of travel. What's less well evolved and what's less clear is the means by which we get there. And for me, government policy has two real kind of cornerstones. One is to set the agenda for outcome, and one is to enable the means to get there. But that requires an industry sector, and it critically requires the backing of mass population. So what we're looking to do here is really not just set the design of the product, the service, the system, the infrastructure that can support it, the policy, the incentivization, but also to start to look at the design, the capability, and the application. But as Andy alluded to earlier, we need to think about the implications too. the unintended consequences, the rebounds. What happens if vehicles become so efficient we drive more? What happens if they become so cost efficient we use our money to take a flight to New York? There are rebound implications that we need to consider, and they become hugely important. So we can't decouple strategy from implementation. And what I mean by that is a good idea delivered badly is perceptively a bad idea. So in customer terms, we talk about customer perception a lot. In their terms, perception is reality. If we see something isn't working, we perceive it as a bad idea. There are lots of good ideas. It's up to us to ensure that they're delivered effectively and delivered in a way that creates the hero projects rather than the disasters in those terms. So here's the academic bit, and I'll keep it as concise as I possibly can. Essentially, there are three types of customers in this kind of environment. One is what we call sort of the aligned or the mature customer, those kind of people that follow you around. Gillette are really good at kind of dealing with this. Other razors are available. But we have one blade, we have two blades, we have three blades, we have four, we have five, we have six, we have a Dyson ball on the blades. We have all kinds of incremental innovations that satisfy a large group of people. And to some extent, this has been alluded to in the automotive sector where we've optimized internal combustion engines and A, B, C, D segment vehicles. We've had weight creep and we've had efficiency gains, but fundamentally we're on a fairly stable trajectory. We can then look at those who we call are aligned or respond to distinctive innovations. Tesla, changes in powertrain, changes in vehicle segment, the MPV, the crossover, the SUV. As we start to move into different segments, they create desire. If we were looking purely on a functional, rational, pragmatic basis for moving a family of four, we might all have bought a Toyota Corolla, but we didn't. We bought a range of things. So people respond to emotive ambition and desire and brand and a whole range of things that we don't control functionally. And those distinctive innovations give us the opportunity to attract some of those customers. But it's the last group, the breakthrough group, that we're really interested in, the early adopters, those people that are likely to make a jump, a change in habit and a change in custom and practice and adopt something brand new. Those customers adopted the iPhone circa 11 years ago. The iPhone, you should understand, was met with derisory concern from its competitors who said, our batteries last 2 weeks. You can't make a working day without plugging it into the wall. You won't last 3 months. That turned out not to be the case. And so to some extent, we're looking at the breakthroughs. We're looking at the people and the organizations and the vehicles and the products and the services that will allow us to change market segments for the better. And in this case, a step change in lightweight. What that means is we create a breakthrough, a new marketplace, a new set of desirable characteristics and parameters that not only early adopters, but early mass adopters will start to respond to. This is one for the marketeers. They all know what this is. So it's Carnot's model of customer delight. You can all kind of read about it ad infinitum. What you guys need to know is there are three distinct things. The basic stuff, if you don't do it, nobody turns up. If there are no wheels on your wheel-powered vehicle, actually people get cross. The second one is performance-related. If your vehicle takes 800 meters to stop, people get a bit cross. If it stops in 3 meters, you might be a little bit sick, but actually quite impressed. And the top one, the one that in early adoption characteristics is quite useful, is what we call functional innovation. The novelty, the surprise, the interest, the thing that gets you on the front pages for all the right reasons, and the things that really encourage people to adopt something new. Typically, they're functional innovations. What most people forget is that this is a snapshot in time and doesn't necessarily reflect changes in expectation. So in terms of infrastructure, this is some of you might recognize this is Oxford. It's the Corn Market in Oxford. It's quite a nice place, although this summer has yielded weather much like that. It's quite expensive, and this is called anti-loiter seating. So this is quite an expensive infrastructure project in Oxford that was designed to stop teenagers congregating in spaces or undesirables congregating in spaces because they sort of upset the shoppers and the ambiance of the parade. The thing is, we can all have good ideas and good intent and spend huge amounts of money doing it. My experience is people live their lives independently of that. And actually, we need to be prepared for user groups to codify their own practice. And so what I mean by that is people will use these vehicles in the way that they want. We need to be really clear about setting regulation and guidance and incentive and practice, whether they're using bus lanes or whether they're compatible with cycle lanes, whether they're sharing space with buses or mass transit vehicles, or whether they're sharing space with cars. The transparency and the legitimacy within which not only the products are certified and regulated, but also the users themselves, creates a tacit acceptance amongst other user groups. It's something that cycling struggles with. If taxi drivers and motorists are alongside cyclists, there isn't a tacit understanding that the user or the vehicle are roadworthy, insured, or competent. We have that opportunity to generate that level of transparency. But here's the paradox. These vehicles have the capacity to do the basic things really well. And when we consider user experience, whether that's electrification, whether that's EV infrastructure, whether that's the use of these vehicles and their compatibility with people's lives, these things have the capacity to do the basic things exceptionally well if we deliver brilliant products, services, and systems. And so here, not only do we deliver functional innovation, we actually deliver high levels of fuel economy or high levels of energy efficiency, high levels of payload efficiency. Remember, a typical motor car is only 5% payload efficient with a single occupant use. We've got the capacity to build a step change, but also that creates delight over a much longer period of time. And with the proliferation of car sharing, drive now schemes, mass utility in terms of cycling and other vehicles, we also have the capacity to amplify that utility even further. So, we're getting kind of towards the end of where we are, but we can unlock innovation potential. And the reason I wanted to highlight this is because there are things that we don't measure. We don't measure in environmental performance the concrete that goes into the ground. So Highways England, Network Rail don't measure the production of concrete in terms of their environmental performance. There are experts who will provide the data that sit behind this, but the reality is you need much less concrete to build a road for a lightweight vehicle than you do for a heavy vehicle. So the realities are building innovative infrastructure to support lighter weight vehicles is infinitely cheaper and more environmentally efficient than it is to produce new infrastructure for heavyweight vehicles. So as we start to dissipate congestion and look at improving a strategic road network, we now have the capacity to think about a different range of vehicles we can accommodate, which unlocks huge potential in terms of vehicle compatibility. Who is sharing what space? So we've got some examples of elevated roadways that could be designed for powered light vehicles that wouldn't be possible for heavier weight vehicles. That also allows these kinds of possibilities to be unlocked over urban environments that simply wouldn't be possible with existing mass vehicles. I put this up because I wanted you guys to know where it comes from. So if I'm a dad, and there are lots of kind of dads around, and when you choose a vehicle, you're mindful of safety. And in terms of early adopter groups, one of the things that that you're minded of, safety is a kind of given. Safety, utility, robustness, convenience are kind of given. They sit above our threshold of indignation. But one of the potential early adopter user groups are those people who haven't yet bought into an M1 category vehicle. The 16-year-olds, the 17-year-olds who are just coming up to test, who are moving to sixth form, further education, higher education, but crave independence and spontaneous mobility. As a dad and as a parent, and I'm part of, I'm afraid, a much more stereotypical group than I would like, this is a factor. So my desire to be a good parent, is right at the core of what I'm trying to do. And that's whether I bought a car when my children were babies, or whether I think about the vehicle my children will use when they're 16, 17, 18 years old. I'm afraid I am typical in this bracket. So that desire to be a core parent is critical in understanding how these early adopter groups are going to develop. And in so doing, it has to be safe. Now, one of the advantages this sector has is that newness in this regard is a proxy for safety. So we have newness and innovation on our side. But what's also useful to note, and this came out of the report that we wrote with Low CVP, we were one of 7 universities, this particular slide simply highlights the idea that cost is not the biggest factor. The underlying assumption was that cost will be the overriding factor in determining whether lighter weight vehicles will be accepted by customer groups or not. That turns out not to be the case for early adopter groups. And that's significant. There is space for premium powered lightweight vehicles. And that's one of the sort of key significances. Convenience, user experience, and environmental performance are still there. They're still huge factors. But cost is not one of them. As we start to look at shared schemes and vehicle utility, so actually these implications are amplified. The step change that we can make, the lower embedded energy, the lower requirement for battery consumption, and the electrification of fleet means we can start to think much more openly about how these vehicles are used and stored, and also the implications for the built environment. The street scene in most urban areas is wonderful when there are no cars in it. Unfortunately, that is no longer the case. And we all love to drive on an empty open road. Well, that doesn't exist either. So the realities are we're looking at dissipating congestion and reducing footprint. And that level of efficiency can be gained in significant numbers when we start to look at developing innovations in response to shared bus systems, or how we start to migrate powered lightweight vehicles across compatibility areas. So this is an example that we put together to highlight how different vehicle types could use a shared space. One of the things that we're mindful of is that user groups don't just see products, they value experience, and they're very much concerned, particularly the early adopter groups in these classifications, are really concerned with how vehicles or how mobility meets and is compatible with their own lifestyle. So not just compatible with other vehicles and safety, but critically compatible with their ways of living or their practices of living. And it's hugely important that regulation, but also consistency around local implementation of policy allows these things to be used in a proliferation of spaces with familiar paradigms, i.e., can you drive this thing in the same way in Birmingham as you can in Newcastle, as you can in Manchester, as you can in London? What are the parameters? Are the parlances the same, and are the codified practices of use going to be consistent? These things are here. I mean, there are some fantastic products around here. There are others in the heavier sectors that aren't here. But these vehicles exist now. The products are starting to come through. And more importantly, the services and the systems need to come through to support them, and the incentivization schemes to back those up. As we sort of leave you with a summary, it's important to recognize that desire is critical in galvanizing this kind of marketplace. Having function and utility is no good without having people who want to buy into it and want to use it. And once we have a visible acceptance of that, actually it starts to galvanize transition from early adoption to early mass adoption. And we can start to build a modal shift before we start to build a cultural shift and really make a step change in expectations. It would be great if my children didn't have an expectation that they would drive a 1,500 kilo car to transport 70 kilos of person. And this is the slide I intend to leave everybody with. We're all coming at it from our own point of view, and what's hugely important is that we recognize there are a range of views and a range of standpoints that really can impact upon the development of this sector. I certainly have my own frames of reference. We kind of know the vast majority of SUV drivers also have their own frames of reference. So let's start to find those people that are likely to adopt early, and let's attract them to what is a fantastic opportunity. Thank you, Tony.